The growing involvement of Australian nationals in the brutal wars in Iraq and Syria has prompted moves by the federal government to further strengthen its counter-terrorism laws. Plans are afoot now to make it an offence to encourage terrorism in order to crack down not just on terrorists but the people who support them. 7:30 can reveal the federal police have issued arrest warrants for 2 Australians accused of fighting with the Islamic State, formerly known as ISIS, in Iraq and Syria. Photographs on social media indicate the 2 men, Mohammed El-Amar and Khalid Sharoof, may have been involved in war crimes. Their posts also reveal a connection to an Australian teenager authorities believe was behind a recent suicide bombing in Iraq. This story contains strong images from the battlefield used as propaganda by the 2 Australians to promote their cause. Rubinsztein-Dunlop and Welch reporting.
This middle-class street in Melbourne's northern suburbs woke last week to some disturbing news. One of its residents, a young man aged just 18, had reportedly blown himself up in a suicide bombing in Iraq.
It was a shock, actually. I guess who would ever expect that would happen in a suburban street in Northcote?
Australian authorities say Adam Dahman killed 5 people in this marketplace in Baghdad. According to the extremist group, the Islamic State, he detonated an explosives vest near a Shiite mosque. They declared him a hero and a knight of Islam.
This particular gentleman, the allegation is that he went over there and blew himself up. He wasn't known to us and wasn't specifically a target of law enforcement investigation. Impossible to stop that sort of thing occurring.
Adam Dahman travelled to Syria after running away from home aged 17 late last year. He posted this photo on Facebook 2 months ago. According to Australian authorities, he took the nom de guerre Abu Bakr al-Astrali and became a fighter for the Islamic State, also known as ISIS. It was a world away from the street his family has called home for decades.
To me, he seemed like just a normal teenage young boy. He's born in Australia, he's grown up here, he went to local schools. Who did he meet that changed him? I got no idea.
Police have told 7:30 Adam Dahman was connected to the 2 most notorious Australians in Syria and Iraq, Mohammed El-Amar and convicted terrorist Khalid Sharoof, who are leading an English-speaking ISIS brigade. El-Amar has written online that he knew the suicide bomber well and praised his actions. El-Amar and Sharoof have both posted horrific photos online, including pictures of El-Amar posing with severed heads. Sharoof wrote bloodthirsty messages, gloating about cutting infidel throats.
Those photographs, if they were authentic, were of course abominable. If they were authentic, what they demonstrated was this man's participation in, and in fact, promotion of violent crimes, probably war crimes.
The photos were taken in the city of Raqqa in Syria, where more than 2,000 people have been killed in the past fortnight in fierce battles between ISIS and the Syrian army.
It's no doubt that El-Amar and Sharoof have been involved in violent incidents since they arrived in Syria and now into Iraq. I'm not surprised by the fact that they're at the forefront of this, and I think they'll continue to be at the forefront until they're no longer active.
Tonight, 7:30 can reveal the federal police have issued warrants for Khalid Sharoof and Mohammed El-Amar's arrest for terrorism offences.
Words don't adequately describe how abhorrent those photographs are. In 30 years of policing, it's probably one of the worst things, if not the worst thing I've seen. I can assure the Australian community that we have current first instance warrants for their arrest, and as soon as they set foot in Australian soil, they'll be taken into custody.
They would be arrested immediately and they would be put before the court, we would be alleging that they are members of a terrorist organisation and that they are likely to have participated in hostile activity in a foreign country.
You know, because it's ISIS.
Brisbane man Yahya al-Khaled has made 3 trips to the Syrian war, he says for humanitarian work.
Fires everywhere.
Despite the horrors of the conflict, he's concerned ISIS is winning over a growing number of young people in Australia.
I've never seen anyone who's that good at propaganda like ISIS. And then you've got all these children who've been playing Xbox their whole lives, go to Syria, and then they think this is like an Xbox game and it's a turf war. It's nothing to do with that. It's your life. You're going to die. Other people are dying because of your decisions.
If a plane happened to fly into the Pentagon in Islam, would they be considered innocent or not? They're not innocent. These are the ones who planned the wars on Islam.
Another Australian in the spotlight is Melbourne convert Musa Serantonio, a vocal supporter of ISIS who was arrested in the Philippines for immigration breaches. Last week he was deported back to Australia, where he's free to continue his preaching.
Explains why you're so silent now, that you've been outspoken, so outspoken.
Yahya al-Khaled met Serantonio last year and says he told him suicide bombings were not haram, meaning forbidden under Islamic law.
I asked him about suicide bombings. I go, what makes them legal under Islamic law? I go, especially that the Quran states that it is haram and you'll go to hell forever if you do it. And he just said to me, I have nothing under a hadith or thing to do it, but you can have your opinion, I can have mine.
The growing role of Australian nationals in the brutal fighting in Syria and Iraq has prompted new calls for tougher laws.
Musa Serantonio really does show up, you know, some of the serious problems that we've got currently. I mean, he's made all these public statements in another country. We know what's going on, and he's been brought back to Australia on that basis. But once arriving here, there are some difficulties in dealing with him. So it's a serious question.
What are the difficulties?
Well, in terms of what future activities he might pursue. I mean, I think that's the key thing. He's already made a whole series of public statements, and he preaches from a pulpit, if you like, or in his own environment, in a way which, you know, is of some serious concern.
The one thing that no Australian should ever think is that this is a problem that exists on the other side of the world. Because while it might take shape on the other side of the world, the number of Australians who are participating in this war fighting in Syria and Iraq shows that this is a problem that exists and germinates within our suburbs.
Okay, another day. Dead bodies everywhere.
This is the biggest threat to Australian domestic security in many years.
Attorney General George Brandis is considering introducing legislation in the next sitting of Parliament to make it easier to convict Australians of terrorist offences. The government wants to make it an offence to encourage terrorism and lower the bar for permissible evidence from a reasonable belief of a terrorist offence to a reasonable suspicion. That's bound to prompt a fierce new debate over national security versus individual rights.
Our government believes very strongly in freedom of speech. And freedom of speech includes the freedom to express radical or provocative views. We don't believe, however, that freedom of speech means the right to incite violence or, in my view, to incite the commission of terrorism.